Test cricket is beautiful for just one particular reason: the ability of a team to give chances and also to fight back on a consistent basis. This is what happened on day 2 in the England versus New Zealand test at Lords. Both teams were bowled out for under 150. For the first time in 68 years in a Lords test, that's what happened. New Zealand all out for 132. We all thought it's game over for them. But England, in a sensational collapse, just managed a 9-run lead, 141. When New Zealand resumed their second innings, they were reduced to 51 for 4. Many people were asking us, is the test match going to end today itself? Well, apparently it has not. Thanks to Tom Blundell and Daryl Mitchell, New Zealand have shown why they are the defending champions of the ICC World Test Championship. They have put in grit, they have put in a superb performance, and by the end of day 2, 236 for 4, a lead of 227, the game has turned around dramatically in New Zealand's favour. Mitchell and Blundell are in their 90s and they are on the cusp of history also. Their 180 run stand actually put them in a very elite list. Firstly, this 180 run stand, which is still unbeaten, is now technically the best New Zealand stand that they have ever had at Lords. It is now level, but they might go past it today, because 180 was stitched by the great Martin Crowe and Shane Thompson in 1994 at the Lords Test. The next best after that was Daniel Flynn and Jacob Oram, 132, that they stitched in 2008. In that match, if you may remember, Jacob Oram scored a century. Jacob Oram and Mark Richardson shared a good 106 run stand for the 5th wicket. These are all for the 5th wicket, I may tell you, at Lords in 2004. Significantly, whenever 5th wicket stands by New Zealand players have gone over 100, they have rarely lost. Out of these 3, in just one instance, that was in 2004, New Zealand lost the test match. But otherwise 2008 was drawn, 1994 was drawn, now 2022, let's see how that totally reinvigorates New Zealand at that point in time. 180 run 5th run stand at Lords is simply a testament to the grit shown by Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell. Make no mistake about it, Mitchell and Blundell are proven test batters. Mitchell, in fact, scored a century against Pakistan recently, and Blundell has scored a century against Australia in Australia during the Boxing Day test. So they are no pushovers. The application that they showed, as I had mentioned in the previous chat, the Lords wicket after a couple of days tends to flatten out totally. The instance that I pointed out was in 2006 when Sri Lanka were bowled out for a low score. England made 550, but Sri Lanka had an epic fight back thanks to Mahela Jayawardene's century. They also reached 500 and saved that test. So, making a comeback in Lords is easier because the pitch flattens out. There was not much of movement. The sun was beating down. Anderson, Matt Potts, Stuart Broad were all trying, but they were let down in a way by Matthew Parkinson's erratic leg spin. Easy shots came. They were scoring at close to 4 runs an over. So, Mitchell and Blundell, hats off to their spirit, and that is why New Zealand are in a slightly better position. What time will the match start? Piyush Bansal is saying, well, the match will begin at 3:30, but the weather forecast for day 3 is not that promising, Piyush, because heavy rain is predicted throughout the day, and there are chances that we may see very little play. At 3 o'clock, they are expecting one burst of rain at the IST, I'm saying. So maybe we may have a curtailed start. I hope it doesn't happen. But looking at the weather and looking at what's ahead for day 3, I will just want to focus on the Mitchell and Blundell partnership. They are already in an elite list when it comes to the 5th wicket at Lords. Going further, if I have to expand the scope of overseas, then they are not that far behind. Alan Border and Greg Ritchie stitched a 216 run stand in the 1985 Ashes Test. That remains the highest 5th wicket stand ever at Lords. Behind them is Javed Burki and Nasimul Ghani in the 1962 Test, wherein they both hit an identical score of 101 and the partnership was worth 197 runs. But unfortunately, Pakistan lost the test by 9 wickets despite such a good fight back. Hansi Cronje and Jonty Rhodes in 1998 Lords, they had stitched a magnificent stand by which South Africa could actually bounce back and win that match. So in 1998, Cronje and Rhodes were in superb form. And that is why in 1998 they had that initiative, but then they lost the remaining tests, and that is why they lost the series 2-1. I have already focused on Blundell and Mitchell as well as Crowe and Thompson. Now the highest fifth wicket stand for New Zealand overseas, if I have to say that who has done the best. Top of that list is 194 by Jesse Ryder and a certain Kane Williamson. I'll come to Kane Williamson later. Everybody will remember this 2010 Ahmedabad test. Williamson hit a century on debut. And because of that, New Zealand almost had India on the ropes at 15 for 5. But Harbhajan Singh's century saved them that test. Ross Taylor and BJ Watling, the two New Zealand players who are not there in this current side, they have already announced their retirements. They stitched an unbeaten 193 run stand against Zimbabwe in Bulawayo. Then don't get confused by which Anderson this is. This is Robert Anderson. Robert Anderson and Mark Burgess in 1976 Lahore stitched a 183 run stand, and that actually was a good performance by New Zealand considering that in Pakistan they have had a pretty bad record. Then Blundell, Mitchell are in 5th. So overall, they have got plenty of records to break heading into day 3. So that is one thing that I am looking forward to heading into the day 3 test at Lords. Now, what are the key highlights that happened on day 2? Mitchell and Blundell are nearing centuries. So they'll be the 15th and the 16th New Zealand players to actually hit tons at Lords. Marden Crowe is the only Kiwi player to have hit 2 centuries at Lords. Such was his greatness that even in his retirement years, when he was plagued with that chronic knee injury, he still managed to hit a century at Lords. He never ever failed at Lords. Very rarely he would fail at Lords. Now, as I had mentioned, why is the Lords wicket so different? On day 1, 17 wickets fell. In the first session itself, you saw close to 5 wickets falling. But in the next 2 sessions, just 1 wicket. The Lords pitch eases out. The grass cover and the swing is there. The swing is there in the air if there is a bit of overcast conditions, but the pitch is actually placid. Lords actually is a very, very flat deck, folks. Let's not get blown away by the greenness and the tinginess of that wicket. So 1 wicket in the next 2 sessions, and that 1 wicket to fall was actually Kane Williamson. I'll come to Williamson in this next slide. Now, Kane has had a very epic struggle in this last couple of years. After he hit that 50 in that ICC World Test Championship cycle, his returns have been woeful. He has not hit a 50 in a test match for close to 2 years now. He's not hit an ODI century for close to 3 years. That 67 that he hit in that semi-final, that was his last. He struggled since then. That elbow injury has really robbed Kane Williamson of his fluency. And we saw in that Lords test match in both the innings, he just could not get the timing right. Normally, that back foot punch which Williamson does would normally be middled and would go to the boundary. Here, it went for an edge and it was caught at slip. So, Williamson struggles, especially against Matty Potts. He got out to Potts in both innings. Edge to the slip. So, there is a lot of concern regarding Williamson. Just 1 test 50 in the last 2 years, and that test 50 came in the World Test Championship cycle against India in that final at Southampton. How New Zealand would be hoping that Kane regains that touch, because the way Blundell and Mitchell have really played, it's a testament to New Zealand's grit, because they needed a solid partnership. Netra Bapardekar is saying, what do you think Henry Nicholls will replace? Who do you think Henry Nicholls will replace once he's available? Now, since Daryl Mitchell has batted so well, is Will Young's place in danger? Shashank, that's a very interesting conundrum. Where does Henry Nicholls fit in? Because Henry Nicholls in this batting lineup will make it much more solid. Then yes, I may have to agree that Will Young's place is in doubt. So perhaps Conway, Latham, Williamson, then Mitchell and Latham, maybe Will Young's place is in danger. You are right. Netra Bapardekar is saying, because I think New Zealand will set England target for England minimum 450 to 500 runs. England can't chase that much. They don't have experienced batters. The game plan is pretty simple now. New Zealand have 3 days, because so many wickets fell on day 1 and also a bit on day 2. Time is ample. But what should be the target? New Zealand should look to add another 150 to 250 runs. Why is that? Because the weather in the next 3 days is not looking good at Lords. Today there is rain spells forecast, there are intermittent showers even on day 4 and 5. So it is not going to be easy for New Zealand to push for a win. And with a placid track at Lords, which only gets better on day 4 and 5, it might be very difficult to get all 10 wickets in the 4th innings. But yes, I do agree with Netra's point that maybe England's batters are not that experienced. I agree. But Ben Stokes, Johnny Bairstow, Joe Root, if they can get going, then these 3 batters are just enough to frustrate New Zealand. Remember, technical deficiencies of the England batters. Alex Lees, standing guard on off and middle, when Saudi is darting it back in off the slope. Just a technical weakness. Joe Root, unfortunately, has not been able to fire in the first innings. Hopefully he fires in the second innings because England need Joe Root and they need Ben Stokes to fire. So that might be the situation. What should be the safe score for New Zealand to beat England? Well, any total in excess of 450, give yourselves, wear down the England bowlers on day 3 as well as on day 4 depending on the weather, score at a brisk rate, and ensure that you set England a target of 450 with 5 sessions or 4 sessions. What will happen? They may lose wickets trying to go for the chase, but you will also not want to give them too little time so that they can stonewall. Stokes can stonewall, Root can stonewall, Bairstow can also stonewall. So depending on that, set a target in the range of 400 to 450. That is the only way you can push for a win. Because remember, this is day 3. Day 3, for 3 days to go, you have close to 9 sessions. Bat out 4 sessions if you can. Because you have already lost 4 wickets. So you have to bat out at least 4 sessions to give yourself a chance of victory. But weather permitting, Lords today does not have good weather for today and tomorrow. So that will be a very interesting conundrum. Why Conway can't open? He performed very well as an opener. Parth Mishra saying, Parth, you're right. Conway, where did he score that double 100? Opening at Lords. Where did he have success in the IPL? For Chennai Super Kings. But perhaps because Will Young did so well in that series against India and because Latham anyway opens, perhaps that was the reason that Conway was demoted to number 4. But ideally I would have it that Conway opens. Perhaps they wanted to negate the left-right combination in tests, but I would say play your best players in the best position. Conway has done brilliantly as an opener. In fact, it was his 50 in the World Test Championship cycle which proved to be so crucial. Before Williamson's 50, he was the only guy who got a 50 and he opened the batting. So put Conway as an opener. I agree with you. I don't think he should bat at number 4. He should bat as an opener. Both the teams are anyway at a World Test Championship final race, right? Mohit Golecha, England are out because, 99.9% mathematically. What are the series that is there for England and New Zealand? England play 2 more tests after Lords against New Zealand. They play 3 against South Africa and they have got an overseas assignment in Pakistan. What about New Zealand? They play 2 tests now, then they play 3 against Pakistan and they finish off with Sri Lanka. Because England are at the bottom, they just won 1. If they draw this, they're out. Mathematically also they're out. But for New Zealand, if they win, assuming you do a 3-0 sweep against England, they are still in mathematically. But for all practical reckonings, getting a 3-0 in England as well as in Pakistan seems a very tall proposition. And remember, New Zealand, if they get out, they are all but out. New Zealand and England are all but out. I do agree. But New Zealand will be cursing their luck for the way how they could not land the killer blow against South Africa in Christchurch and how they collapsed on that one fateful day against Bangladesh at Bay Oval. That was really, really problematic. And that's why you see they're all but out of the reckoning. My finalists for the ICC World Test Championship will depend on how South Africa play against Australia and how India cope up against Australia. Those 2 series might probably define who goes to the championship, which might be held. There are reports that the 2023 ICC World Test Championship cycle might be held at Lords. So maybe the team that may determine the fortunes of most of the teams is South Africa. I think we should not consider New Zealand as underdogs now, Ronit Singh, because they are performing well as a team, not as a player individual score. Ronit Singh, no, we are never underestimating New Zealand. The days of underestimating New Zealand ended when they reached the finals of 2015 and 2019 World Cup and they won the World Test Championship. They are no longer the underdogs. But you are frustrated with them because, see, you failed to land the killer blow against South Africa. You collapsed against Bangladesh at home. What was the difference in the World Test Championship cycle of 2021? They won all their matches at home. So there was a buffer if they could lose overseas. This time that buffer is also not there. So they are also all but out of the reckoning, unfortunately. I think Nichols should play in place of Young. Priyanshu Raj, yes, I do agree. Even someone else had also said, Parth, I guess, said that, yes, Nichols should play and Conway should open, Will Young should go out. That is what is the situation. And any other comments? With CDG, Jamieson and Saudi to come, New Zealand can take a lead up to 300, to be honest. Chill out 777. Okay, sure. The trio of Jamieson, Saudi, Bolt are simply phenomenal. Let's make no mistake about that. Colin de Grandhomme is a good bowler who can give you wickets and is accurate. But we have seen in the past that which England turns up on their day, we don't know. Ashes, not a single score of 300 plus. Maybe at home they can get a 300 plus score. So for a buffering sake, if you want to ensure that you go all out for the win, get a target in excess of 400, 450. That will ensure that you have enough time, weather permitting, and you bowl the opponent out. And yes, everybody saying Matty Potts getting caned twice. He too is like an Ollie Robinson of last year. Monroe Diaz, yes. I mean, there are a lot of similarities with the way how Ollie Robinson and Matty Potts are bowling. Because remember, Matty Potts heads to Lords on the back of a very good county championship. 35 wickets in 6 matches. His pace is somewhere close to 83, 84 and can get that ball to swing both ways, off the deck and in the air. But tougher pastures. Will he do well in South Africa? Will he do well in Australia, where swing doesn't matter? Pace of the deck and movement of the deck matters. That will be very interesting for Matty Potts to know. But yes, he's had a great start to his test career. 4 wickets in the first innings. Now got Williamson out again. Anderson, as usual, sensational. 4 wickets in the first innings and also. So, Anderson, there is a long line of players who can succeed the duo. Mark Wood is there, Matty Potts might be there, Chris Wokes if he's injured, if he can hang around. Jofra Archer, uncertain. I don't know when will Archer come back in the test squad. Frankly, I do agree with Peterson's comments that we may not see Jofra Archer in tests. So that's one big blow. Then I think Saudi and Bolt, especially Saudi, how can he swing so much in 1.2 degrees? Well, Saudi is a class act and he's got a fantastic record at Lords. I mean, let us make no mistake about it. Saudi has been on the honours board plenty of times at Lords. He took 10 wickets in 2013. He is a class act along with Bolt. What happened to Williamson? Akshad Negi, this one stat, only one test 50 in last 2 years. That elbow injury has robbed him of his fluency. Because a classic example, Williamson before the elbow injury, that back foot punch would go to extra cover for a boundary. He would also find the gap. But here, the same condition, he edged it. Somewhere, that 0.1%, that fluency, the timing, the positioning, that elbow injury has probably cost Williamson that. That's why he may have to adapt his game or that struggle might prolong for a long time. So, whose battery trio is more dangerous? Shami, Bumrah, Siraj, Saudi, Bolt, Jamieson, Pat, Joss, Stark, Rabada, Ngidi, Jansen, Priyanshu Raj. Oh my goodness, that's a very, very difficult question. Can I just be allowed, Priyanshu, that the trio, all the 4 that you mentioned are simply sensational. Okay, as far as ranking is concerned, I will put Pat Cummins, Josh Hazlewood and Stark at number 1, Shami, Bumrah, Siraj at 2, Jamieson, Bolt, Saudi at 3 and Rabada, Ngidi and Jansen. Why? Because Josh Hazlewood is the metronome. Cummins is brilliant. Stark might be weird, but when he gets it right, he's dangerous. Shami, Bumrah, a class act. You just cannot ignore them. Siraj might be a bit exceptional, but he's a great red ball bowler. Then Saudi, Bolt, Jamieson, everybody, if you want swing, there's Saudi. If there is accuracy, there is Bolt. If there is pace, bounce and swing, there's Jamieson. And if there's hostility, there's Neil Wagner. So that New Zealand bowling is simply sensational. There are today chances, yes, Parth Matre, I did say that there are chances of rain today. So yes, so that is the situation, folks. If The clear blueprint for New Zealand heading into day 3. Bat until you get a target in the range of 400 to 450. Take into account that rain might delay significant portions of day 3 and day 4, and if day 5 the weather is clear, then just go for the win. You may just want England in for 4 sessions, but till then just bat out and get to 400 to 450. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us for this preview and review of day 2, a tribute to the Mitchells and the Blundells in the New Zealand camp. They are really fantastic. Tom Blundell, take a bow, might get to his 3rd century. Mitchell might get to his 2nd. Join us for more such analysis on Sports Today. Press the like, comment and share button, folks. We are also there on Facebook. Press the bell icon and you'll get these notifications.